RIN TV coverage of the 2015 Joint Industry Forum is brought to you by PCS, a unit of Verisk Analytics. Leigh Ann Pusey is considered by many a Washington insider. Our cameras caught up with the president and CEO of the American Insurance Association to get her take on the new Congress, as well as legislation and regulation that will impact the insurance industry in the coming year. Here are the highlights.
Well, there's going to be a lot of issues, but I think the ones that have been talked about the most in terms of the election year issues, if not market and economy driving issues, will be if Congress decides to tackle tax reform. It will certainly be of importance to this industry, not just the life side, but the P&C side. For most in our industry, we haven't had significant tax reform in 20 years, since 1986. So this will be a big challenge. I think it's probably in the 2 to 4 year range, but it'd certainly be a priority when Congress takes it up. I think cyber, we've talked about it a lot here at the Joint Industry Forum, but it will be, continues to dominate CEO and industry executive panels. So the real challenge is for the industry is how does we grow that market? How do we not only understand it more, find the talent, understand how to price it, and grow that market at the same time. Public policymakers are looking at it and trying to decide how do we encourage information sharing, how do we look at laws in the books on privacy that insurers have been subject to, and how to, along with other industries, how do we resolve those so that we can get ourselves to the right place to solving this problem. So I think cyber will be a real issue. I think there's hopes for things like trade agreements, which many in the insurance industry do care about. We hear a lot about growth, and a lot of that growth is going to be driven by our ability to get outside the U.S. and to grow in global markets. And so we really do need healthy trade relationships to do that. And there's a couple of trade agreements that are maturing. There have been discussions ongoing, but until we can get some trade promotion authority through Congress to allow the White House to further engage on these, we're a little stymied, but again, it's optimism there. We've got both sides of the aisle saying they want to make that an accomplishment. So I think I would look to that. And then clearly, somewhat hopefully, with a different majority in charge, I think both in state legislatures where there was tremendous turnover as well. We focused a lot on Congress, but the states had tremendous turnover as well. 30 governorships are in the hands of Republicans. I think the insurance industry will be looking at legal reform, tort reform issues. We've got asbestos, we've got bad faith that are very important in some of our states as well as at the federal level. So those will be, I think, always on the agenda, but maybe up a little bit higher than they've been in the past. Well, the IIS is putting out a lot of documents that are getting the industry's attention these days. So their December document, which was a market report, I think didn't hold a lot of surprises. For the market. It had, basically a stable outlook, but acknowledged there's a lot of challenges in the marketplace and the role of alternative capital and reinsurance and that trickle-down effect. So there was a lot in that. But as the IIS, as a standard-setting body, focused on really supervision and financial stability for this industry, as we all know, and you mentioned in one of your questions, ComFrame as well, this common framework for internationally active insurers, not to be confused with G-size, globally systemically important insurers, which is the corollary to the U.S.'s designation of a SIFI, which is a significantly important financial institution. We really need to pay attention and make sure that, systemic risk and internationally active don't become the same thing, because they're not at all. And we've got processes and methodologies to determine whether that. So I think as we look at the IAIS really is focused on this ICS, or Insurance Capital Standard exercise now. The U.S. is very focused on that. All markets are focused on it. It is more or less, I think, assumed the conversation. In other words, I think that Insurance Capital Standard will be used in the common framework for these internationally active companies. We already have a BCR, a backstop or basic capital requirement that will become the foundation for the systemically risky companies. So we've got all these acronyms and all this activity. So the IAS is very active. They're pumping out a lot of documents. Currently, I think the industry around the globe is going to be responding to yet another document they released specifically on the ICS. So that's probably sucked the air out of the room. And the good news is that the U.S. is finally, I think, our representatives in that global conversation, led by the Federal Reserve and Treasury, but certainly informed by our day-to-day state regulators. That new Team USA, as they call themselves, is working together. They are looking at what the U.S. could support, both in terms of how something could work domestically, and then how it could be applied globally. And the important thing here that I think the U.S. has really tried to insert in this conversation, and I believe that the global standard setters share as well, is we have to do this in a way that maintains a competitive playing field globally as well as within the U.S. Having different standards that create winners and losers is not the outcome, and that's not in the interest of financial stability or I suspect in any supervisors, that's not what they're trying to achieve. So the important thing here, I think, is to always have the guidepost be what's going to create the best market for consumers and create a competitive market, which is good for consumers. And with that in mind, then it's got, these rules have to be workable and enforceable. And I think if, at the end of the day, if the right folks can get around the table, we can come up with some things that are in fact workable, but don't stymie the industry. And I think that that's really our biggest task ahead of us. And we'll start that primarily working with Team USA, but talking to our global colleagues as well.
For more of our coverage of the 2015 Joint Industry Forum, visit the RIN TV On Demand Library.